I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Princess Anne did not enter the emergency council chamber to ask questions. She entered carrying the answers. Before King Charles, Prince William, and Queen Camilla, the Princess Royal placed a sealed bundle on the table and exposed a forbidden directive designed to interfere with the lawful succession. As the first page was opened, Camilla's composure broke, and the monarchy realized this was no family quarrel, but a constitutional reckoning. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The closed doors changed everything. Anne had summoned the Lord Chancellor and 2 palace lawyers to Windsor Castle, then barred aides from entering. The Lord Chancellor understood why. Continuity Directive C-17 was an order concerning what would happen if the king died or became unable to rule. The Accession Council, the body that confirms the new sovereign, was never meant to receive information filtered through a consort's office. Anne broke the seal and placed the original directive beside an instruction sheet and a routing ledger. The pages showed that Camilla had ordered officials to hold William's accession briefing for 72 hours, while her office reviewed what councillors would receive. The prince felt the meaning. This was not caution. Someone had tried to place the queen between the heir and the machinery that would recognize him. Charles recognized the markings from his wife's office. He stared at them, set the page down, and refused to meet her eyes. Camilla tried to speak, but the king raised a hand. His silence struck harder than anger, because she understood what he was asking without words. How far had she intended to go? Anne answered, before the queen could shape a defense. She withdrew an envelope and slid it across the table. Camilla saw her handwritten initials beside 4 words, "Hold until my authorization." Her fingers tightened against the chair. William watched her expression change, and his remaining doubt disappeared. The next clause cut deeper. It attempted to give Camilla influence over the councillors of state, royals legally permitted to perform duties when a sovereign is ill or abroad. No household instruction could grant her that power. The palace lawyers confirmed it, and the Lord Chancellor closed his notebook. Anne delivered the blow. These were not copies or recollections. They were the missing originals, removed from the succession archive and concealed among ceremonial correspondence. Then she touched the last unopened sleeve. Inside, she said, was a recorded conversation identifying who had helped prepare the unlawful clauses before anyone could intervene. The papers had exposed the plan, but the voice on that recording would expose the fear and ambition behind it. The crisis was constitutional, but its deepest wounds were painfully personal. Camilla feared becoming powerless the moment Charles could no longer protect her. Anne believed silence would betray both her brother and the late queen. William saw his future being discussed, as though it belonged to someone else. Around one table sat a wife, a sister, a son, and a king, each carrying a different version of loyalty, and each prepared to defend it. Camilla had spent years building influence through private access, careful relationships, and her closeness to the monarch. Yet her position as consort, the spouse of a reigning sovereign, gave her no legal authority over succession, the automatic process deciding who inherits the crown. She could advise Charles personally. She could not stand between William and the throne or override procedures protected by law. Anne carried a different kind of loyalty. During Queen Elizabeth II's final years, the Princess Royal had recorded several private conversations in a handwritten journal kept among her personal papers. The late monarch had repeated one warning: the crown survived only when individual wishes remained beneath constitutional duty. Now her daughter believed remaining silent would betray that final lesson. Charles felt the choice tearing through him. He wanted to believe his wife had acted from fear, not ambition, yet the directive threatened the institution he had sworn to protect. The king leaned toward Camilla and quietly asked whether she understood what those clauses attempted to achieve. She held his gaze, and answered that she had only been safeguarding stability. He heard the defense, but he did not hear regret. William carried the wound differently. Before entering the chamber, Catherine found him alone, repeatedly folding and unfolding the same briefing note. The Princess of Wales watched him fight his anger, because this was more than a legal dispute. The file treated his future reign like a danger requiring control. She urged him to seek the truth before demanding punishment, and he promised her he would try. Anne stopped him moments later in a private corridor. She placed one hand on his arm and warned that the 72-hour delay was only the surface. According to the recovered routing ledger, Camilla's office planned to contact selected counselors, control the first palace announcement, and present a revised continuity arrangement before the heir received his complete legal briefing. William understood the trap. A continuity arrangement was simply the official plan for keeping royal duties running during death or incapacity. But this version would have created confusion at the most fragile moment imaginable. Anne then showed him a handwritten list naming 3 officials chosen to receive early instructions. One had resigned without explanation. Another had denied seeing the directive despite his initials appearing beside it. Anne lowered her voice and revealed how her search had begun. During a private succession rehearsal, she had witnessed one red folder being removed from William's place and delivered to Camilla's office. The documented rehearsal log later vanished. To understand why the Princess Royal opened the archive, the story had to return to the afternoon when that folder was deliberately placed in the wrong hands. The conspiracy did not begin with Anne discovering a hidden file. It began months earlier with a red folder, a nervous equerry, and a sentence spoken behind a half-closed door. What should have been a routine continuity rehearsal became the moment the Princess Royal understood that someone was testing the boundaries of succession law. She said nothing that afternoon. But from that moment forward, she watched every door, signature, and missing page. The memory pulled Anne back to 14 November, when Buckingham Palace held a closed continuity rehearsal inside the Blue Drawing Room. A continuity rehearsal is a private test of how statements, legal briefings, and royal duties would be handled during a national emergency. Separate folders had been prepared for Charles, William, the government liaison, and the Accession Council Secretariat, the officials responsible for organizing the formal recognition of a new sovereign. The king expected routine order. His sister sensed something else. Anne watched an equerry approach William's designated seat and remove the red folder placed there for him. He crossed the room, avoided her eyes, and handed it to Camilla's private secretary. A routing card rested across the cover with one handwritten instruction: Queen's office to review before Prince receives. The future king had not even entered the room, yet someone had already decided that information meant for him should pass through another office first. Anne followed the equerry into the corridor and stopped him beside the closed door. She asked who had ordered the transfer. His face changed instantly. He admitted the command had come from above, then begged the Princess Royal not to force him to identify the source. She allowed him to leave, but his fear told her the mistake had been deliberate. Camilla confronted Anne later that evening, without aides present. The Queen insisted William was too impatient to understand the dangers of sudden power. She described the folder review as protection, not interference. Yet the Princess Royal heard something colder beneath those words. Her sister-in-law was not merely questioning the prince's judgment. She was testing whether his access could be controlled before anyone challenged her authority. Anne returned to the records room after dinner and opened the official rehearsal log. One page had been replaced. She touched 2 freshly severed binding threads where the original record should have remained. A duplicate entry preserved inside the documented courier ledger supplied the missing truth. William's folder had stayed in Camilla's office for 47 minutes before being returned with 2 sections removed. The discovery deepened the danger. Those sections concerned the immediate accession briefing and the councillors of state, royals legally allowed to perform certain duties when the sovereign is ill or abroad. Anne quietly sought help from a retired archive registrar, who confirmed through a signed account that the replacement page did not match the original paper stock. The registrar searched for weeks before finding Continuity Directive C17 hidden inside a box labeled as Garden Patronage Correspondence. He warned Anne that someone had recently inspected the same catalogue. Camilla might already know the search had begun. When Anne finally carried the recovered originals into Windsor, she was no longer investigating a suspicion. She was preparing to confront the woman at its center. Charles asked the question only once. "Did you authorize this?" Camilla looked at her husband, then at William, but it was Anne who refused to let the silence become an escape. One document after another crossed the polished table: the directive, the altered rehearsal log, the courier record, and the handwritten order. With every page, the Queen's defense narrowed, until protecting the king no longer sounded like loyalty, but justification. The locked chamber offered no escape. 2 palace legal advisors had authenticated every original before the confrontation began, checking signatures, paper records, and archive markings. They numbered each copy to prevent another page from disappearing. Their conclusion was brutal. Directive C17 had come from Camilla's office, and the handwritten authorization carried marks matching earlier instructions she had personally approved. Anne leaned forward and explained what the papers threatened. Succession could not be delayed by a consort's private office, because the crown passes instantly to the lawful heir when a monarch dies. The Accession Council only confirms that legal transfer in a formal meeting. It does not choose the next sovereign. Camilla had attempted to create a pause where the law allowed none. Charles turned toward his wife. The king repeated his question, quieter this time, and waited. She denied approving the directive's final language. Anne said nothing. She simply pushed the handwritten page across the table until it stopped beneath the Queen's hand. Camilla recognized her own initials, and the denial collapsed. Camilla admitted ordering what she called a temporary safeguard. She feared William would remove her influence the moment Charles became unable to rule. The prince stared at her in disbelief, then answered that fear of losing status did not give anyone the right to interfere with the crown. His voice remained controlled, but the betrayal beneath it was unmistakable. Anne reached for the final piece of evidence. She played a recorded conversation recovered from the archive registrar's secured device. Camilla's voice instructed an official that no accession statement should leave the palace until her office had reviewed how it described the queen consort. A second voice warned that the command violated the established continuity plan. Her reply ended all doubt. The household needed to create room for interpretation before government lawyers intervened. Charles rose so suddenly that his chair scraped against the floor. He walked away, removed his glasses, and stood in silence, while his wife insisted she had acted to protect him from being erased during illness. The king finally turned back, but grief had replaced anger. Her plan could not legally prevent William from succeeding him, yet that no longer softened the violation. One legal advisor delivered the final judgment. Attempting to obstruct official information and invent authority was a grave breach, even if the succession itself remained unchanged. Charles ordered everyone to stay available, while an independent review determined who could void C17 and impose consequences. Camilla had lost the argument inside the room. The next battle would decide whether she also lost every instrument of influence beyond it. The monarchy may be surrounded by ceremony, but succession is not controlled by family affection. It is controlled by law, parliament, sworn councillors, and procedures no private office can rewrite. That reality now became Camilla's greatest danger. Anne possessed the evidence, Charles held household authority, and William was the lawful heir. Yet none of them could simply erase the scandal with a royal command. The crown's survival depended upon submitting itself to rules stronger than personal power. Palace Council laid out the limits with unforgiving clarity. Statutes, laws passed by Parliament, determined succession, while the Accession Council formally confirmed the new sovereign. Regency legislation governed what happened when a monarch became unable to perform official duties, and Charles controlled access inside the royal household, the staff and offices supporting the sovereign. Camilla possessed influence within that world, but she held no independent power to delay William, redesign a regency arrangement, or tell counselors whom to recognize. William listened without satisfaction. The prince should have felt protected by the legal conclusion, yet the wording of C-17 unsettled him. Private interference had come dangerously close to contaminating the first hours of his future reign. Even a failed attempt could have produced conflicting announcements, frightened officials, and public doubt at the exact moment the country required certainty. Charles carried the heavier choice. Exposing his wife's conduct could damage the monarchy, but hiding it could make the entire family responsible. Anne warned the king that the original documents would eventually become part of the historical record. Concealment would not protect the crown. It would prove that those closest to it believed themselves exempt from its rules. Charles lifted his fountain pen above an immediate suspension order. His hand stopped. The monarch asked for 5 minutes alone, then left the chamber while Camilla remained under legal supervision. When he returned, his face had lost all softness. He sat down, read the order once more, and signed it without looking toward his wife. The Lord Chancellor then disclosed the result of his documented review. C-17 had traveled beyond Camilla's office through a sealed digital copy sent to the palace communications director. That official had received instructions to prepare 2 accession statements. The first correctly named William as sovereign immediately. The second described the Queen as temporary guardian of royal continuity, an invented role carrying no constitutional authority. The communications director had preserved both drafts in a secured archive, creating evidence no one could dismiss. Charles froze his wife's access to succession rehearsals, constitutional planning, and sealed government correspondence, while the final review continued. The Lord Chancellor approved the restriction, and Anne watched Camilla absorb the new reality. Influence that had taken years to build had vanished with one signature. The danger refused to end there. When an official delivered the order and opened Camilla's private cabinet, one crucial page was missing: the list naming every courtier who had agreed to help. The directive had been frozen, but the missing page proved the palace had not yet contained the people carrying it forward. By morning, the punishment was no longer theoretical. Camilla's constitutional briefing box was removed. Her private secretary was suspended. 2 secure office passes stopped working without warning. Across Windsor, doors that had opened for years now remained closed. Yet the most painful consequence came without ceremony. Charles cancelled their scheduled meeting and sent his decision through an equerry. For the first time, the Queen understood that her husband was acting as sovereign before acting as spouse. Charles's suspension order had taken effect before sunrise. Camilla still held her title and could attend ceremonial events, but every route toward constitutional influence had been closed. Her briefing box, the secure container used for sensitive state papers, was taken away, and she was excluded from succession planning, government correspondence, and regency discussions concerning who could act when the monarch was unable to perform his duties. Camilla arrived at her office and pressed her access card against the secure reader. Read. She tried again, then a third time, refusing to accept what the light meant. The Queen finally lowered her hand and asked the waiting equerry whether Charles had personally approved the restriction. He confirmed that the king had signed every page. She dismissed him, closed the door, and sat beside the empty space where her document box had rested. Palace security moved quickly elsewhere. Officers sealed the cabinet containing the rehearsal files, while legal staff compared the recovered originals with electronic access records and handwritten dispatch books. The comparison mattered, because the missing cooperation list could identify everyone who had helped circulate C-17. Without that page, Camilla might face consequences while other participants remained protected inside the household. William resisted pressure from advisors demanding harsher action. The prince felt betrayed. Yet Catherine warned him that defending succession must never become revenge. The Princess of Wales reminded her husband that anger could make him resemble the very people who had tried to control him. He listened, rejected calls for immediate dismissals, and agreed to let the documented review reach its conclusion. Anne received the first dangerous result before midday. Electronic records showed that someone had accessed the cooperation list after she requested the emergency meeting, but before security sealed the archive. The Princess Royal understood the timing immediately. Someone inside the palace had known precisely what she planned to expose. A damaged sheet recovered from a secure disposal bag made the betrayal worse. 2 initials survived along one torn edge. One belonged to Camilla's suspended secretary. The other appeared to identify a veteran courtier whom Charles had trusted for more than 20 years. Anne checked the courtier's appointment ledger and found a private meeting with the Queen on the same night the original rehearsal log disappeared. Charles intervened before his sister could confront either suspect. The king requested one final conversation with his wife. No lawyers, advisors, or relatives between them. Camilla accepted. The legal verdict was approaching, but first the monarch and his queen had to face what ambition and fear had done to their marriage. With the advisors gone and the doors closed, Charles and Camilla were no longer sovereign and consort. They were husband and wife, confronting a betrayal neither could disguise with ceremony. She had spent years believing the crown would protect her from humiliation. Now that same crown stood between them. Charles did not demand another legal explanation. He asked why she had risked his son's future, and her answer transformed the scandal from a struggle for power into a confession of fear. Silence filled the small Windsor sitting room. No secretary recorded the exchange, and no official papers separated them. A sovereign is the reigning monarch, while a consort is that ruler's spouse without equal constitutional authority. Those definitions now carried painful weight. The king possessed the legal responsibility to protect succession. His wife possessed only the hope that he might still understand why she had crossed the boundary. Charles told her the documented review had reached its first conclusion. C-17 had been invalid from the moment it was written, because a private directive could not rewrite succession law. The remaining decision concerned Camilla's future access and the punishment of everyone who helped her. She listened, then finally admitted the fear she had hidden beneath every defense. Camilla believed William's accession would erase her overnight. The Queen feared losing her home, public role, private staff, and the protection Charles's reign had given her after years of rejection. She had watched the prince grow more confident, and convinced herself that his first act as king would be to remove her from royal life. Fear became suspicion. Suspicion became action. Charles asked whether she had ever trusted him to protect her dignity through lawful arrangements. Camilla could not answer. The king slowly removed his wedding ring, turned it once between his fingers, and replaced it. The gesture carried no threat of immediate separation, but it revealed how deeply her choices had damaged the trust between them. Camilla then made a full confession for a written account Charles would take to the council. She admitted ordering the alternative accession statement and approving the 72-hour delay. She named the veteran courtier who destroyed the cooperation list after her private secretary requested it. The courtier had acted out of loyalty to her office, while the secretary believed the evidence would disappear before Anne reached it. The Queen insisted she never intended to stop William from becoming king. She wanted enough confusion to negotiate guarantees before he gained control of the household. Charles rejected the distinction. Confusion during a transfer of the crown was precisely the danger succession law existed to prevent. Camilla agreed to surrender every remaining copy, accept permanent exclusion from constitutional planning, and challenge no final determination. She signed the confession and passed it across the table. Charles left carrying her admission. He would place it beside Anne's recovered evidence, allowing his sister's documented case to become complete. The private battle had ended with the truth. The public reckoning would begin when the palace could no longer hide why its queen had been stripped of influence. By noon, the secret had escaped the castle. Phones rang across newsrooms, crowds gathered outside royal gates, and a phrase once buried inside a hidden directive appeared in enormous black letters: Guardian of Royal Continuity. Britain was no longer debating a difficult marriage or a palace rivalry. It was confronting evidence that private fear had reached into the machinery of succession, and that Anne had forced the monarchy to expose its own breach. The palace released its statement shortly after 12. It confirmed that an unauthorized continuity directive had been declared invalid, and that access to constitutional planning had been permanently changed. A continuity directive is an official instruction designed to keep royal duties and government communications stable during a crisis. C-17 had tried to turn that safety measure into a route for private control. Charles approved every line before publication. The king refused to reveal the most painful details of Camilla's confession, but the statement confirmed that Anne had supplied original documents, allowing palace and government lawyers to identify the violations. That admission mattered. The monarchy was not dismissing the scandal as gossip. It was publicly accepting that the breach had existed inside its own walls. News spread with breathtaking force. Outside Victoria Station, a fictional special edition of the Crown Ledger carried the headline, "Anne's Hidden Files Stop Palace Power Plan." Commuters paused beneath the enormous words, reading that William's accession briefing had nearly been delayed while the Queen's office tried to create an authority that law never recognized. Rain fell outside Buckingham Palace as the crowd grew. Conversations stopped when a broadcaster read the most decisive sentence from the palace statement. No consort could delay, control, or condition the lawful accession of an heir. Some people condemned Camilla's actions without sympathy. Others recognized the fear behind them. Yet relief dominated, because the arrangement had been discovered and stopped before a real constitutional emergency. Anne watched the broadcast alone at Gatcombe Park. The Princess Royal showed no triumph when the presenter called her intervention a defense of William and Queen Elizabeth II's legacy. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering the late monarch's warning that personal wishes must always remain beneath duty. Her success carried no joy because exposing the truth had wounded her brother's marriage. The palace then released 2 further findings from its documented review. The veteran courtier who helped destroy the cooperation list had resigned, ending more than 20 years of royal service. Camilla's suspended private secretary surrendered the missing page and confirmed through a signed account that every participant had now been identified. No part of C-17 remained active. William issued a restrained written statement supporting Charles's review. The prince thanked Anne for acting with loyalty to the crown above personal comfort. He did not mention Camilla, but his silence carried its own judgment. Charles now faced the final step. With the record corrected and every participant exposed, the monarch prepared a permanent determination defining his wife's future. Britain had delivered its verdict in shock and relief. Now the king had to make that verdict irreversible. The final decision did not remove a crown, end a marriage, or alter the lawful line of succession. It did something more precise and more devastating. Charles permanently removed Camilla from every constitutional, regency, and accession briefing, voided every instruction issued under C-17, and restored all continuity authority to its lawful channels. Anne had not destroyed the Queen. She had destroyed the illusion that proximity to the monarch could ever place one person above the crown. The final council delivered a unanimous judgment. Continuity Directive C-17 was void from the moment it was created, meaning it had never possessed legal authority. Every altered rehearsal paper was replaced, every unauthorized statement was destroyed, and the succession protocol, the official procedure protecting the lawful transfer of the crown, was restored without a single hidden clause remaining. Charles signed the permanent determination with Camilla seated across from him. The order barred her private office from receiving accession papers, reviewing continuity announcements, contacting the accession council, or participating in regency planning. The king finished the final line, set down his pen, and passed the document to William. William read the determination once. The prince showed no triumph as he placed it before Anne, silently acknowledging that her intervention had protected his lawful future. She accepted the gesture with a slight nod. Neither needed to describe what the discovery had cost their family. Camilla accepted the decision without protest. Later, the Queen removed the unused constitutional dispatch key from her chain and returned it inside a plain envelope. She retained her title and ceremonial place, but the authority she had tried to create was gone forever. Her fear of being erased had not destroyed her position. It had destroyed Charles's trust. Charles remained beside his wife personally, but he drew a boundary their marriage could never cross again. The monarch promised her dignity, not constitutional access. His love survived the scandal. His confidence in her judgment did not survive unchanged. William rejected calls for revenge. The future king confirmed through a written account that Camilla would retain ceremonial respect and personal security. His restraint proved the very quality she had doubted. He did not need to humiliate her to protect the crown. Anne carried the original documents back to the secure archive. The Princess Royal placed them beneath Queen Elizabeth II's accession seal and closed the box. The late Queen's warning had been honored at last. Family must serve the crown, never control it. The recovered cooperation list was complete. Every participant had been removed from continuity duties. Every secret copy had been surrendered, and no unresolved instruction remained. Camilla's attempt had failed completely. The crisis ended with succession protected, the unlawful directive erased, and one lasting truth restored. Anne's courage preserved the transfer of power. Charles reaffirmed the limits of royal privilege, and William inherited a monarchy capable of correcting itself. Duty had proved stronger than fear. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.